If you're unaware, I have released part 1 of 2 of my series review of ABC's Lost, and before the summer commences, I'll be dropping part 2, in which I discuss the show's Flash Sideways component of the final season at length. I'm just briefing you with this info in case you're dissatisfied with the depth or lack thereof at which I delve in regard to that particular element of Season 6, given that part 3 solely deals in final season material, a trio of episodes specifically. Before part 3 commences, I will quickly present my personal definition of the Flash Sideways, which was only ever given that nickname because the true nature of this world slash timeline slash whatever you want to call it is only fully revealed in the final 10 or so minutes of the series. The whole sideways element is simply due to the fact that this place is sort of presented as this alternate reality, initially leading us to believe that Jack and Faraday's Season 5 Jughead plan was at least somewhat successful. So simply put, the Sideways is this sort of limbo, a place between our world and the next. It is this collective kind of consciousness shared between many of the characters whom we've grown to know and love throughout the show's 121 episodes, all of whom, as Christian Shephard states, played an exceedingly important role in one another's lives. This place is meant for individuals that have deep-seated personal issues that must be resolved before they're ready to move on to the afterlife. Now, the first of the trio of episodes that I'll be discussing today, Season 6, Episode 5, entitled Lighthouse, which focuses on our impeccable series lead, Jack Shephard. The ending of this piece is super foreboding, as Jacob states to Hurley that the smoke monster is headed for the temple, which still houses some of Hugo and Jack's friends. I personally quite enjoy the Crazy Claire plotline. I find it to be extremely bold and wickedly clever, to heavily parallel the stories of Miss Littleton and Danielle Rousseau. I dig all of the Lighthouse content, and intense Matthew Fox in particular kills it here, as the Lighthouse's supernatural component is introduced to him, the one involving the kind of mystical mirror that displays multiple locations, namely, kind of eerily, Jack's childhood home. Now, back in episode 105, White Rabbit, we were witness to a drunken Christian stating to a young Jack that he doesn't have what it takes. This particular quote is prevalent to Lighthouse, before being brought up again later in Season 6. It's utilized in 605 in particular when Hugo informs Jack of Jacob's encouraging words, the antithesis of Christians, "You have what it takes," in order to push Jack out of the temple and toward the titular lighthouse. This moment, among an abundance of others throughout the series, displays that much of Jack's emotional baggage comes from what a lit Christian said to him as a youngster. Jack's relationship with his father has been colossally complex since day one, and it is essentially the primary emotional crux of his Flash Sideways story in 605, which is where the true heart of this piece resides. Fox and a young Dylan Minnette depict a father-son relationship that is complex, initially consisting of a great lack of communication, then ultimately becoming rewardingly sweet and kind of poignant. This whole Jack-David relationship, showcasing the struggles Shephard endures as a dad, is imperative to the internal process of Jack resolving his lifelong issues with his father. 615. Across the Sea is to Lost what the book of Genesis is to the Bible, and I have only enjoyed this episode more as time has progressed. This is the earliest point we get to witness of the Lost timeline. There are a number of elements I dig within 615, but the one I would specify as the most effective would be in relation to the Man in Black. The Man in Black is, of course, our primary antagonist of the final season, and what Across the Sea does so bloody brilliantly is that it forces the viewer to greatly empathize with this character and understand his rather vindictive motives. This humanization makes the subsequent episodes infinitely more effective. Mark Pellegrino and Titus Welliver in particular shine here, along with the mysterious mother portrayed by Allison Janney, and whether you're satisfied with them or not, this episode provides us multiple answers to some of the show's biggest questions. We learn of the true technical function / purpose of the island, as well as the true identities of the Adam and Eve skeletons, said beautifully explained mystery having been introduced during Lost's very beginnings. We're also witness to the birth of our smoke monster and the origins of the island moving wheel. I also find the placement of this piece to be admirably bold, as episode 118 of 121 is the sole episode that largely features none of our main players. 617/18. I truly can't count the vast number of times I've viewed this 2.5-hour spectacle, which beautifully concludes this epic tale, and throughout each viewing, I've wept at least once. While episode 615 ultimately puts the cap on the answers / mythology / lore of the series, the end is a tribute / goodbye to our immeasurably amazing Losties. This thankfully extensive piece really zeroes in on the series-long theme of letting go, and, well, the whole 6th season depicts the finalization of Jack's transformation from a man of science to a man of faith, another series-long concept. The perpetually magnificent Michael Giacchino shines here, the end showcasing perhaps my favorite collection of music, the final 9 or so minute piece entitled Moving On being a highlight of this episode's sensational score. Let's talk about performances, which, although always excellent, are in peak form here. The scene between Michael Emerson and Terry O'Quinn, as Ben is finally truthful about his envy toward Locke, apologizing to him, is simply beautiful and perfectly simply written. The scene in which Jack, the new Jacob, hands over his sacred job to Hugo is exceedingly emotionally effective. Truly all of our big, lovely reunions are powerful and tear-inducing. The Man in Black's death is very satisfyingly handled. It's an excellent touch, given that his lifelong goal has been to leave the island, that even when fake Locke, is kicked off the edge of a cliff, his corpse ends up atop a giant rock protruding from the island. Not even in death does he get to leave. Now, I'm well aware that the series finale is divisive. The final season in general was more so polarizing than the others, although I personally believe nearly the entirety of the final season to be utterly exceptional and simultaneously creatively daring and satisfying. I can at least understand why a Lost fan may not be as big on season 6 as the show's other seasons, primarily due to the Flash sideways element, and of course at least a small amount of polarization is going to come along with unconventionality. What I've never really understood, individuals who have thoroughly enjoyed the 6th season before then believing the finale solely to be unfulfilling. I'm not entirely sure how that particular correlation is objectively possible. Now, bear in mind, anecdotally, I've been involved in far too many discussions over the years, during which adamant individuals claim that in the end they were disappointed to learn that our Losties have been dead since the series' commencement, which is clearly and deliberately debunked in the show itself during the dialogue between father and son. So that's always been frustrating, but I slightly digress. I'll be tackling topics such as these in my final series review. I absolutely adore the visual parallels between the show's final moments and the pilot's beginnings. Season 1, of course, commences with an extreme close-up of Jack's eye suddenly opening. He then finds himself lying on the floor of a bamboo forest. Vincent approaches Jack before our well-dressed protagonist exits the forest, passing a white tennis shoe along his way toward the beach. In Lost's last moments, a gravely injured, blood-soaked Jack walks through this same bamboo forest before collapsing to the ground. He passes a now tattered, graying tennis shoe hanging from a tree. A now horizontal Jack is then visited by Vincent, the loyal retriever lying down next to him. Jack smiles while watching Captain Frank J. Lapidus, piloting a craft filled with Jack's friends, fly away from the island before we're given the final shot of the end, displaying a dying Jack's eye finally closing. In conclusion, the end, for me personally, is a colossally satisfying, creatively and emotionally, ending to this huge, masterfully made series. It wraps up this story brilliantly whilst paying tribute to this spectacular show's history.